The photographer lifted his camera and called, "All the grandchildren, right here by the Christmas tree." Noah stepped forward first. My sister Valerie's 2 children followed him, laughing as they squeezed beneath the gold lights. Lily stood beside me with both hands wrapped around the portrait she had spent 3 weeks painting for my mother's 70th birthday. For one hopeful second, she smiled. Then Valerie moved in front of her. "Not the affair, child," she said, loud enough for every cousin, aunt, and church friend to hear. "We're not framing that mistake." The room did not go silent all at once. It happened in pieces. A laugh stopped near the fireplace. A glass touched a table too hard. The photographer slowly lowered his camera. Lily's smile disappeared. She did not cry. That almost broke me more. She lowered the portrait of my mother's childhood home, opened the back of her art folder, and removed a folded payment confirmation. Valerie's face changed before Lily said a word. My daughter unfolded the paper with careful fingers and looked at the woman who had spent 2 years calling her a scandal instead of using her name. "Aunt Valerie," Lily asked, "should I show them why Dad paid you every month to hide Nina and me from Mom?" My mother whispered, "Aaron, please. Not today." My father said, "You adopted her. We didn't." I stepped between my daughter and the family that had mistaken her silence for permission. "Her name is Lily," I said, "and she is not carrying your shame anymore." Valerie laughed and called the paper meaningless. She was right about one thing. That single page was not the whole case. It was the page that connected my sister's company to an apartment, a series of invoices, and a promise my ex-husband had signed under oath during our divorce. At 8 the next morning, preservation notices were in their inboxes. My sister's husband had placed a compliance hold on the biggest deal their company had ever attempted, and my ex-husband was calling me for the first time in 11 months. Before I take you back to the day I first learned Lily existed, I hope you're doing well. Stay with me, because what my family called a scandal became the truth that exposed all of them. And please subscribe if you believe children should never be punished for an adult's betrayal. 7 years earlier, I did not know Lily existed. In August of 2019, I believed my marriage was tired but steady. Scott and I had been together for 11 years, and our 8-year-old son, Noah, filled most of the spaces where romance had once lived. We shared grocery lists, traded school pickups, and trusted that routine meant safety. Scott worked as a regional sales director and ran a small consulting company called Blake Market Solutions on the side. His schedule was never predictable. Client dinners became overnight trips, and weekend calls became hours away. Whenever I questioned it, Scott had an explanation, and my younger sister Valerie usually confirmed it before I even asked her. "He's helping me with a vendor problem," she would say. Or, "I saw him at the hotel near the convention center." I took that as reassurance. Looking back, Valerie always knew exactly where my husband was. The call came on a Wednesday afternoon while I was reviewing staffing schedules at work. "May I speak with Valerie Blake?" a woman asked. "You have the wrong number. This is Aaron Blake." There was a pause, followed by the careful voice people use when a form and a human being disagree. She introduced herself as the coordinator of an after-school program at Westbrook Elementary. A student named Lily Cross had experienced a mild asthma episode. The staff had followed her action plan, and she was stable, but an authorized guardian needed to come. I told her again that she had the wrong person. She checked the form. My number was listed under the name Valerie as the alternate emergency contact. The child's father was listed as Scott Blake. Once I corrected her assumption that I was Valerie, she stopped discussing Lily's condition and asked that a legal guardian contact the office. My first thought was identity theft. My second was that another Scott Blake had somehow entered my number. I asked questions, but the coordinator would only confirm that my phone number appeared on the emergency form. She would not discuss Lily's medical record or release the child to me. I left work anyway. At Westbrook, the receptionist asked for my identification, then told me to wait in the front office while they contacted the legal guardians again, Through a narrow window in the door, I could see a little girl sitting beside a staff member. She held a purple backpack against her chest and breathed through a spacer attached to an inhaler. She had dark hair like Scott. That meant nothing by itself. Plenty of children had dark hair. Then she rubbed her thumb over the edge of the backpack strap in the exact nervous rhythm Noah used before a doctor's appointment. I was still telling myself it was coincidence when Scott rushed through the front entrance. He stopped so suddenly that the door almost struck him from behind. "Aaron," he said. He did not ask why I was there. He did not look confused. He looked caught. I stood up slowly. "Who is Lily Cross?" His face emptied of every expression I knew. Before he could answer, a woman in navy scrubs hurried into the office. The receptionist greeted her as Nina Cross, checked her identification, and only then had the staff bring the little girl out. The child went straight to her and called her Mom. When Scott moved toward them, Lily looked up with unmistakable relief and called him Daddy. The word landed harder than any confession could have. The receptionist gave Nina a brief summary and had her sign for Lily. I waited until the staff member stepped away, before asking the only question my mind could hold. "How old is she?" Nina looked at Scott before she looked at me. 5, she said. 5 years did not leave room for an accident, a drunken night, or a mistake Scott had regretted before morning. 5 years meant birthdays, doctor visits, rent, school forms, and hundreds of deliberate lies. Lily looked from one adult to another. Scott's hands shook. Nina gripped the inhaler until her knuckles whitened. I walked toward the far end of the hallway before I faced him. Whatever he had done, I would not make a 5-year-old listen while adults discussed whether her existence had ruined a marriage. Scott followed me. He said Nina had believed we were separating, that things became complicated after Lily was born, and that he could never find the right time to tell me. "There were 5 years of right times," I said. He admitted he had helped pay for Nina's apartment and Lily's expenses, but insisted the money came through his consulting income, not our household accounts. When I demanded to know how my phone number had appeared on the school form, he covered his face. He had completed Lily's enrollment on our old family laptop, the same one we had used for Noah's school forms. The browser had filled my number into the alternate contact box. Scott had changed the contact name to Valerie, then failed to notice the number had remained mine. One careless field exposed the life he had spent years protecting. From behind us, Lily asked, "Dad, did I do something bad?" Scott turned toward her, but I could not. That question followed me all the way to my car. A child who did not understand betrayal already believed she might be guilty of it. Valerie called before I reached home. She sounded shocked, with almost theatrical precision. She cursed Scott, asked whether Noah had heard anything, and told me not to start digging through accounts while I was angry. "You'll make decisions you can't undo," she warned. It was strange advice from a sister who claimed she had just learned my husband had another child. It was also the first advice I ignored. I changed the passwords on every joint account. I was legally entitled to access and downloaded our bank statements, tax returns, mortgage records, and the financial summaries Scott kept for Blake Market Solutions. The business records showed broad vendor totals but no names, and I did not yet know what they concealed. That night, I told Scott to pack a bag. By morning, I had called a divorce attorney. Scott stood in our kitchen with his suitcase near the door and said, "Lily didn't ask for any of this." "Neither did Noah," I told him. "Neither did I." The following month, I filed for divorce. Filing for divorce did not make the truth easier to explain to Noah. It only gave the truth a date. He was 8, old enough to know that his father had lied, but too young to understand how one lie could become a second home, a school form, and a little girl who shared his eyes. Scott wanted us to tell him together. I refused. I would not sit beside the man who had built 2 lives and help him make the destruction sound mutual. I told Noah that his father had broken promises to me and that Lily was his daughter. Before he could ask whether she was the reason Scott was leaving, I made one thing clear. "She didn't do anything wrong," I said. The adults made the choices. Noah stared at the carpet, then asked, "Does she know she's my sister?" He said sister without hesitation. Scott had introduced them months earlier at a park, claiming Lily was the daughter of a work friend. They had played together 3 times before the school call exposed the truth. Noah remembered that she liked drawing animals and feared the tallest slide. Learning they shared a father did not erase those afternoons. It only gave them a name. During the divorce, I did not ask Noah to stop seeing her. I also did not trust Scott to arrange secret meetings or use the children to make himself look devoted. Their visits happened in public places, at Nina's apartment while I remained nearby, or eventually at my house, under rules I controlled. The first time Lily came over, she stood inside the doorway with her backpack still on both shoulders. Noah had scattered paper and markers across the kitchen table because he remembered she liked to draw. "Can I have water?" she asked. "Of course," I said. She filled a glass halfway, drank carefully, and washed it before setting it beside the sink. 10 minutes later, she held up a blue marker. "Do I have to give these back when we're done?" "They live here," Noah said. "You can use them." Lily looked at me for confirmation. "You can use anything on the table," I told her. She nodded and whispered, "Sorry." I had not accused her of anything. Later, she apologized when a marker rolled onto the floor, and again when she did not like the sandwich I offered. Each apology arrived before anyone could decide she was inconvenient. I hated what her presence reminded me of. I also began to hate that she could feel my discomfort without knowing where to put it. Nina and I never pretended we were friends. We exchanged brief texts about pickup times, school events, and Lily's inhaler. The first time we spoke alone, Nina said Scott had told her our marriage was ending before their relationship became serious. She admitted she later learned that was false and stayed longer than she should have. "I'm not asking you to forgive me," she said. "That's good, because I can't." She accepted the answer. That mattered more than an apology designed to ease her conscience. Scott did not move in with Nina after leaving our home. He rented a furnished apartment and said he needed time to repair the damage. In reality, he was repairing his reputation. He attended Noah's games, posed for school pictures, and told mutual friends the divorce had followed years of private problems. His visits with Lily became less predictable. At first, he picked her up every other Saturday. Then sales trips interfered. Later, he began dating a woman from another division of his company and stopped mentioning Nina or Lily around colleagues. Noah noticed before I did. "Dad says Lily's house is too far," he told me. "It's only 15 minutes from his apartment." "That is something your father needs to explain," I said. I would not defend Scott, but I would not turn Noah into my confidant either. My family thought I should end the connection completely. Valerie said I was inviting the wound into my house. "You're letting Scott's betrayal sit at your kitchen table," she told me. "No, I'm letting Noah see his sister." My mother worried Noah would feel replaced. My father said I was making an already confusing situation worse. I gave all 3 of them the same rule. No one was allowed to discuss Lily's birth, Nina, or the affair in front of either child. If they could not separate a child from what adults had done, they would not be around the children together. Valerie rolled her eyes. My mother called me dramatic. My father said silence did not change biology. "Kindness doesn't require changing biology," I told him. For a while, the children made everything simple. Noah brought Lily comic books he had outgrown. Lily drew him ridiculous superhero costumes. They argued over board games, traded snacks, and learned not to expect Scott on time. One Saturday, in 2021, I drove them to an indoor soccer tournament. Scott had promised Lily ice cream afterward, but canceled that morning for a client dinner. While the children ate fries in the back seat, Noah mentioned that Scott had missed Lily's birthday the month before because he had taken Noah to a baseball tournament. He said it casually, without understanding what it meant. Lily went quiet. Noah looked at her in the mirror and understood too late. "I didn't know," he said. It's okay, Lily answered immediately. You had a tournament. He should go to your things. Her voice was too cheerful. She was protecting Noah from feeling chosen at her expense. I could have gone with Mom, Noah said. You didn't do anything. It wasn't your fault. I pulled into a parking lot and turned to face them. Noah, Lily is right. You didn't make that decision, I said. Then I looked at her. But you don't have to make him feel better about it either. Lily lowered her eyes. I don't want him to feel bad. She had been disappointed by her father, yet her first concern was protecting the child he had chosen that day. By 2022, Scott's visits with Lily had become occasional calls and last-minute cancellations. His new relationship had become serious, and he arranged his life so no one in it had to ask difficult questions. One evening, after a museum trip, Noah fell asleep with his headphones on, while Lily watched rain move across the window. Can I ask you something? She said. Of course, I answered, and she asked, when Noah understands everything, is he going to hate me? He already knows you're his sister. I mean, when he understands why you and Dad got divorced. I tightened my hands around the steering wheel. She had carried the question for years. You are not why we divorced. But if I wasn't born, you wouldn't have found out. That is not the same thing. She watched me carefully. Aunt Valerie said some things can be true even if people don't say them. I did not ask when Valerie had spoken to her. Lily needed an answer before I dealt with my sister. Scott made promises to me, I said. He broke them. He lied to Nina, and he kept lying after she learned the truth. Adults made those choices. You did not make him cheat. You did not make him lie. You did not break our family. Lily's mouth tightened, as if she was afraid to believe me. Then why does everyone look at me like I did? I had no answer. That made the adults in my family look better. Because people sometimes put blame on the person least able to fight back, I said. That does not make the blame belong to you. A few miles later, Lily fell asleep against the window. When I reached her building, Noah was still asleep beside her, their shoulders touching in the back seat. For years I had seen Lily as proof that Scott had betrayed me. Looking at her then, exhausted from carrying guilt no child should have known, I realized she was proof that he had betrayed her too. I could no longer think of her as someone else's child. By January of 2023, I had stopped thinking of Lily as the child who exposed my marriage. I had not forgiven Nina, and I had not forgotten what she chose, after learning Scott was still married. But when her name appeared on my phone one cold Tuesday morning, my first fear was for Lily. Nina asked to meet without the children. Her voice sounded thinner than I remembered. We sat in a quiet corner of a coffee shop near the hospital. She wrapped both hands around a paper cup but never drank from it. She told me she had an aggressive cancer, that treatment might slow it but would not give her the certainty she needed. I already called Scott, she said. I said nothing, waiting for her to finish. He won't take her. The words should not have surprised me. Scott had spent the previous year reducing fatherhood to missed calls and small transfers. Still, hearing that he had refused Lily before Nina had even asked me made something harden inside my chest. He said he has a new family now, Nina continued. He said moving Lily into that house would be disruptive. He offered to keep sending money. How generous of him. Nina lowered her eyes. I know what I'm asking. No, you know what you need. That isn't the same thing. Her parents were dead. The one cousin she still spoke to lived across the country, cared for an elderly husband, and had already said she could not raise a child. There was no relative ready to step in for more than a few days. Nina had met with an attorney. She had signed a nomination naming me as the person she wanted the court to consider if she became unable to care for Lily. She had also prepared written permission for me to receive the school, medical, and identification records that would be needed if I ever had to petition for guardianship. The papers did not make me Lily's guardian. They only made Nina's wishes clear. You expect me to raise the child my husband had with you, I said. Do you understand what that asks me to live with every day? Yes, I do. You don't get to become sick and turn everything you did into something noble. I know that too. You don't get to ask this as if it proves I've forgiven you. I'm not asking you to forgive me, she replied without self-pity, making it harder to keep my anger clean. Nina looked toward the window. You're the only adult who ever looked at Lily without blaming her for what we did. I wanted to reject the sentence because it sounded too much like praise, and praise was not what I needed from her. But I knew she was right about one thing. Lily had learned to apologize for occupying space, because nearly every adult around her treated her existence as a problem to be managed. I won't decide this without talking to her, I said. Nina nodded. You shouldn't. That evening, I asked Lily to sit with me at the kitchen table while Noah finished homework upstairs. She was 8, and already knew her mother was sick, though Nina had protected her from the worst possibilities. I told her Nina wanted to make a plan, in case she could not care for her for a while. I did not promise anything, and I did not ask Lily to comfort me by saying she wanted to live with us. What do you want? I asked. She twisted the cuff of her sleeve. Can Mom still be my mom? Yes, I told her. If I stay here, can I keep her pictures? Every one of them. Can I see her whenever the doctors let me? I'll take you myself. Only then did she answer my question. Besides, Mom, you and Noah are the only people I trust. There was no joy in hearing it. Trust from a frightened child felt less like a gift than a responsibility placed carefully in my hands. I met with a guardianship attorney the following week. She explained that Nina's nomination would matter, but it did not automatically transfer custody. Scott was listed on Lily's birth certificate and had signed an acknowledgement of paternity. Unless a court found another legal reason to bypass him, his position had to be addressed. Scott agreed to meet at his attorney's office. He wore the expression he used when he wanted to appear burdened rather than selfish. I can't bring Lily into my home full time, he said. My wife knows Lily exists, but she never agreed to raise her. Neither did I. You already know Lily. Noah loves her. It would be less traumatic. He said the words as though my history with Lily had been created for his convenience. His attorney placed the written consent in front of him. Scott read less than a page before signing. He did not ask for a trial period, a visitation plan, or more time to think. Watching him give up responsibility so easily hurt more than watching him lie. The lies had required effort. Abandoning Lily required only a pen. When Valerie learned what I was considering, she came to my house without calling. You're turning compassion into your entire identity, she said. People are going to think you have no self-respect. I'm not making this decision for people. You have Noah to think about. Noah is one of the reasons I'm considering it. My mother asked what church friends would say when they learned I was raising Scott's other child. My father declared that Scott should be forced to take responsibility, then refused to call him or say the same thing to his face. Their concern always stopped at the point where action became uncomfortable. By spring, Nina's treatment had weakened her enough that Lily began staying with us several nights each week. Before one hospitalization, Nina brought a plastic storage box to my house. Inside were Lily's birth certificate, school records, insurance information, photographs, an old phone, folders labeled in Nina's handwriting, and the wooden paint box Lily had used at Nina's apartment. Nina lifted the paint box just enough to show me a sealed envelope hidden beneath its removable tray. For Lily, when she begins blaming herself, I don't want you going through everything unless you need it, Nina said. Some of it belongs to Lily. I won't, I assured her. She placed the box in my hands and said, I believe you. I used only the documents required for school, medical care, and the court. I did not open the sealed envelope or search the old phone. Whatever Nina had preserved, her illness did not give me permission to turn her private life into mine. When Nina entered the hospital for an extended stay in June, I filed the guardianship petition. The court ordered a background check, reviewed my home, and scheduled a hearing. Scott's written consent did not guarantee the result, but it removed the argument that he intended to assume custody. In July, the probate judge appointed me Lily's temporary guardian. The order allowed me to make school and medical decisions while Nina remained unable to care for her. It was not an adoption, and I did not tell Lily it was forever. Nina died in September. At the funeral, Lily stood beside the casket, holding one of her mother's scarves. Scott arrived late, spoke to her for less than 5 minutes, and left before the burial. Valerie watched from across the chapel, but did not approach. Afterward, I drove Lily and Noah home through steady rain. Noah went inside first to give us privacy. Lily remained in the car with Nina's scarf folded in her lap. "How long can I stay?" she asked. The question was so quiet that I almost pretended not to hear it. I turned toward her. "Tonight, you're coming home with us. Tomorrow, we keep doing the next right thing." She nodded as if I had given her a schedule instead of a promise. Upstairs, Lily placed her backpack beside the new bedroom door. She did not unpack it. Even after the court order, even after the funeral, she was still waiting for someone to tell her she had stayed too long. Temporary guardianship gave me permission to sign Lily's school forms, speak with her doctors, and make decisions when she needed an adult. It did not make me her mother in the eyes of the law, and it did not make her believe she was staying. For the first few months after Nina died, Lily kept most of her clothes inside the backpack beside her bedroom door. When I washed something, she folded it and returned it to the bag. She displayed photographs of Nina on the dresser, but left the walls around them bare, as though hanging anything permanent might tempt the house to reject her. I did not ask her to unpack. I did not call the room hers before she was ready to believe it. We found a counselor who worked with children dealing with grief and disrupted families. Lily attended alone at first, then invited me into several sessions. She spoke more easily about Nina than about Scott. Missing her mother felt safe. Admitting that her father had chosen another life made her ashamed, as though being abandoned revealed something defective about the person left behind. At home, I kept Nina's name in our conversations. We cooked one of her pasta recipes, marked her birthday on the calendar, and kept the scarf Lily had carried at the funeral in a cedar box. Loving Lily did not require me to erase the woman who had given birth to her, even if that woman had once helped break my marriage. The first time Lily called me Mom happened during a thunderstorm in November. A transformer blew somewhere down the street, plunging the house into darkness. Lily woke disoriented and ran into the hallway just as another crack of thunder shook the windows. "Mom, where are you?" I stepped out of my bedroom with a flashlight. The moment she saw me, she froze. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I didn't mean to call you that." I wrapped a blanket around her shoulders. "You never have to apologize for needing me." She searched my face, as though expecting me to correct her. "You can call me Erin," I continued. "You can call me Mom. You can change your mind tomorrow. None of those choices will make me send you away." Lily nodded, but she did not say the word again that night. She sat beside me until the power returned, one hand gripping the edge of the blanket. Noah was adjusting too. He loved having Lily with us, but love did not make him endlessly patient. He had spent 12 years as my only child. Suddenly, he had to share the bathroom, the television, and the private routines that had once belonged to us. Their worst argument began over a cardboard box. Lily kept Nina's letters, photographs, and small keepsakes inside it. One afternoon, Noah moved the box from the dining table because he needed space for a school project. A birthday card caught beneath the lid and tore across Nina's handwriting. Lily stared at the rip, then turned on him. "You ruin everything, and still get to keep everyone," she shouted. "You don't know what it feels like when your own father decides you're not worth staying for." Noah's face changed. He had not meant to damage the card, and he had his own wounds from Scott, even if they looked different from hers. "I said I was sorry," he answered. "Dad left me too. Not the way he left me. Noah walked upstairs and closed his door harder than necessary. Lily immediately began crying. Not only because of the card, but because she believed anger had endangered her place in our home. I waited until she could hear me. "Noah made a mistake," I said. "You were allowed to be upset. You were not allowed to use the thing that hurts him most as a weapon." Her eyes widened. "Are you mad at me?" "Yes. I'm upset about what you said." She looked toward the hallway, where her backpack still rested near the stairs. "Do I have to leave?" The question made something inside me ache, but I kept my voice steady. "No, you have to apologize." I asked Noah to come back down when he was ready. Lily told him she had wanted him to feel as abandoned as she did, then admitted that was cruel. Noah apologized again for moving the box carelessly. Together, they repaired the card with archival tape and placed it inside a plastic sleeve. Later, when Lily and I were alone, I told her, "You were wrong tonight. You are still my daughter tomorrow." She studied me for a long time. "What if I do something worse?" "Then we deal with something worse. Being your mother does not mean pretending you never make mistakes." That night, Lily unpacked half her backpack. I did not begin the adoption process immediately after Nina's death. Lily needed time to grieve without feeling that accepting me required betraying her mother. When she finally asked whether the court could make our family permanent, I contacted an adoption attorney. The process was not a single signature. A social worker inspected our home, interviewed me and Noah, reviewed my finances, and confirmed that Lily had her own space. I completed background checks, submitted medical information, and attended post-placement visits. Lily continued counseling throughout the process. Scott remained Lily's legal father until the adoption was completed. He had to give formal consent before an authorized official who explained what he was surrendering. Once the adoption decree was entered, he would no longer have custody rights or authority over her school or medical care. His future support obligation would end, though any unpaid amount already owed would not simply disappear. Scott signed, then asked more questions about whether he would continue receiving updates than about how Lily felt. When the official explained that Aaron's adoption would make me Lily's only legal parent, he nodded and signed his name as if closing an inconvenient account. In July of 2024, we stood before a probate judge. The courtroom was smaller than Lily expected. There was no jury and no dramatic speech. The judge asked whether she understood that I was not replacing Nina and whether anyone had pressured her. Lily glanced at me before answering. "Aaron never asked me to stop loving my mom," she said. "She just stayed after Mom couldn't." The judge smiled gently and entered the decree. Outside the courthouse, Noah handed Lily a small house key attached to a blue ribbon. She already had a key, but he had bought a blank one with his allowance and asked the hardware store to cut it himself. "This one is official," he said. Lily laughed, then cried into his shoulder. My parents sent a brief message saying they hoped the decision brought me peace. Neither of them called Lily their granddaughter. Valerie called that evening. "You actually went through with it," she said. "I did," I replied. Valerie's mouth tightened. "I still don't understand why you would adopt the affair child." The words were quieter than a shout, but they carried more contempt. I ended the call before responding in anger. Then I sent one message to Valerie, my parents and every relative who expected access to my children. "Her name is Lily. No one will discuss Scott's affair in front of either child. Noah and Lily will not be treated as two levels of family. Anyone who cannot follow those rules will not spend time with them." Valerie accused me of issuing threats. My mother asked why everything needed to sound so formal. My father did not reply. That December, a Christmas card arrived from my parents. The envelope was addressed to our home. Inside, my mother had written, "To Aaron, Noah, and guest." I placed the card face down on the counter. The court had recognized Lily as my daughter. My family had decided that even the law could not make them call her by her name. My mother's Christmas card did not change Lily's legal place in our home, but it clarified her place in theirs. Carol and Raymond treated her as someone I expected them to tolerate, not as their granddaughter. I stopped pretending their hesitation was temporary. Still, Noah loved his grandparents, and Lily had lost enough people to believe loving her always cost someone else a family. I reduced the visits, stayed present, and enforced the rules I had already given them. Christmas of 2025 showed me how easily discrimination could hide inside politeness. My parents invited us for a small gift exchange. Carol handed Noah a wooden keepsake box, engraved with his name and the words, "Christmas 2025. Love, Grandma and Grandpa." Inside was a collection of old family photographs and letters Raymond said Noah should keep because he would one day be responsible for remembering where he came from. Lily received a gray scarf with the store tag still attached. It was not an ugly gift, which made the difference easier for Carol to deny. Noah received family history chosen for him. Lily received something practical that could have been bought for anyone. Lily wrapped the scarf around her neck. Immediately. "Thank you, Grandma Carol. It's really warm. I love gray." She thanked my mother twice more, then gathered the discarded paper while Valerie's children compared their personalized ornaments. Lily asked whether Carol wanted everything taken to the recycling bin. "You don't have to clean," I told her. "I don't mind." I knew she did not mind. That was the problem. Lily had learned that usefulness could compensate for not belonging. On the drive home, I asked whether she liked the scarf. "Yes," she said quickly. "Grandma didn't have to get me anything." Noah looked down at the engraved box resting on his knees. He did not say anything, but he carried it upstairs without showing Lily the letters inside. When I spoke to Carol the next morning, she acted confused. "You told me not to exclude her, and I bought her a gift." "You bought Noah a piece of the family. You bought Lily something from the front table of a department store. She's hard to shop for. She has lived with me for 2 years." Carol sighed. "You examine everything for evidence that we're failing her." I ended the call before the conversation became another trial, in which Lily's feelings had to be proven beyond reasonable doubt. The following spring, Raymond called Noah directly and invited him on a weekend fishing trip. My father had taken every Avery grandson to the same lake since Valerie and I were children. He described it as a family tradition and told Noah he was finally old enough to help prepare the boat. Noah was excited until he asked whether Lily could come. Raymond said it was a trip for the Avery grandchildren. Lily heard the conversation from the kitchen. She immediately found a reason to leave the room. I called my father back. "Noah will not attend an event where his sister is excluded, because you have decided only one of my children counts. This has nothing to do with Lily. It has everything to do with Lily. She does not have to participate in every tradition. Neither does Noah." When I told him he was not going, Noah was angry with me. "I didn't make Grandpa say that," he said. "Why am I the one losing the trip?" "You aren't being punished." "It feels like it." He was right that the boundary hurt him too, and I did not demand immediate understanding. "If you go," I said, "Grandpa learns he can exclude Lily and still have access to you." A few days later, Noah asked whether she had even wanted to go fishing. Lily admitted she had not. "Then this whole fight is stupid." "It isn't about fishing," she said. He nodded. Privilege had looked like an invitation he had never needed to question. By autumn, our visits had become rare. Valerie invited us to an open house for Pike & Co. Events after moving into a larger office. I agreed because it was public, brief, and easy to leave. A woman from the local Chamber of Commerce asked Valerie who Lily was. Valerie rested a hand against Lily's shoulder and said, "She's the girl Aaron adopted." I removed Valerie's hand. "This is my daughter, Lily." The woman greeted Lily by name, but Valerie laughed, as if I had interrupted a harmless joke. "You know what I meant." "Yes, and you had the chance to correct it." She did not, so I took both children home. Carol later accused me of embarrassing Valerie in front of business contacts. "She introduced my daughter as a category instead of a person," I said. You have become too comfortable with words that hurt her. During that open house, Matthew had joined us briefly at a buffet table. He was discussing the company's planned purchase of a wedding venue and complained about the lender's paperwork. Our outside accounting system remembers everything, he said with a tired laugh. 10 years of invoices, attachments, and approval records. The insurers love it. I'm convinced it knows more about the company than I do. At the time, I barely listened. Matthew often talked about business, as if everyone shared his interest in operating agreements and financial controls. I remembered the comment, only because of what happened later. As Christmas approached, Lily began working on a portrait for Carol's 70th birthday. My mother had once described the small farmhouse where she grew up, with blue shutters, an apple tree beside the porch, and a cracked stone step her father had promised to repair, but never did. Lily remembered every detail. She asked about the upstairs window and the apple tree, then studied Noah's family photographs until the house matched Carol's memories. Watching her work made me angry. Lily was studying a history the family refused to share with her, believing enough care might make them see more than the circumstances of her birth. Around Thanksgiving, Raymond brought the family watch that had belonged to his father. "This should stay in the family," he said. Noah looked at Lily and asked for time instead of accepting it. After my parents left, Lily urged him to take the watch because he should not lose anything because of her. "I don't know if it's mine for the right reason," Noah said. Again, Lily protected someone else's privilege because she feared her presence made it fragile. 3 weeks before Christmas, Carol came to my house alone. Her 70th birthday fell on Christmas Day, and Valerie was organizing a combined birthday and holiday celebration. Carol said she wanted every child and grandchild together. A professional photographer would take portraits by the tree. "All the grandchildren?" I asked. "Yes, all of them. Say their names." She hesitated before answering. "Noah, Lily, Mason, and Chloe." It was the first time I had heard her include Lily without qualification. Carol promised Valerie would behave. She said no one would discuss Scott, Nina, or the adoption. Lily would be included in the photographs, and Carol wanted the evening to become a new beginning. "This is not a test Lily has to pass," I told her. "It is the last test you are asking me to give you." Carol agreed, but I still did not trust the promise. We would drive ourselves. The children would remain near me. Our coats would stay by the entrance, and one cruel remark would end the visit. When I explained the invitation, Lily looked at the unfinished portrait. "I want to give Grandma the house," she said. "After that, if she doesn't want me there, I won't ask again." She had spent weeks creating a gift for a woman who had kept her on probation for 2 years. The night Lily finished painting the apple tree, she lifted the wooden paint box Nina had packed into the records bin years earlier. Something caught beneath the removable tray and slid across the carpet. It was the sealed envelope Nina had shown me before her final hospitalization. On the front, in Nina's handwriting, were the words she had written before she died. "For Lily. When she begins blaming herself." Lily held the sealed envelope in both hands, as if opening it might change whatever Nina had intended to protect. The words on the front had waited more than 3 years beneath a tray of paintbrushes. "For Lily, when she begins blaming herself." I sat beside her on the bedroom floor. The portrait of my mother's childhood home rested against the wall, finished except for the signature Lily had not yet added. "You don't have to open it tonight," I said. She wrote my name. She also wrote when. "You get to decide whether this is that time." Lily traced the edge of the envelope. "I think I've been blaming myself for a long time." I did not argue. I slid one finger beneath the flap, only after she nodded. Inside was a single sheet of paper folded around a handwritten note. The printed page looked like a payment confirmation, not a personal letter. At the top was the name of Scott's consulting company, Blake Market Solutions. Beneath it, a transfer of $4,200 had been sent to my sister's company, Pike & Co. Events. A short message appeared below the confirmation. "Received. Housing and school handled." The message had been forwarded to Nina from Valerie's business email. Lily read the company name twice. Why was Dad paying Aunt Valerie? I don't know yet. It says housing and school. I see that. She turned the page over, searching for an explanation that was not there. Was she paying for us? Maybe she was moving money. Maybe she was charging for something. One page does not tell us which. Lily reached for her phone. I covered it gently with my hand. You are not calling her, I said. But she knew. We have a document that suggests she received money. We do not know the full reason, and I will not let her pull you into an argument before we understand it. Lily looked down at Nina's note. Nina had not asked me to forgive her. She had not tried to explain the affair or turn illness into innocence. Her handwriting was uneven, but the message was direct. Lily, you were never the reason anyone lied. Valerie knew more than she admitted. I kept this because one day you might need proof that the adults made choices before you were old enough to understand them. None of those choices belong to you. Lily pressed her lips together. Mom said Aunt Valerie always knew when Dad was coming. Your mom told you that? Once. I asked why Dad never surprised us. She said Aunt Valerie always knew when he was coming, and I thought she meant Dad told her. The memory mattered, but it was still the memory of a younger child. I would not build an accusation on it. What you remember may help us know where to look, I said. It is not something you have to prove. The next morning, I called Denise Park, the attorney who had handled the final stages of my divorce. I had not spoken to her in years, but she remembered Scott's consulting company and the financial disclosures he had signed. She asked me to bring everything Nina had given me, along with my divorce file. I did not open Nina's old phone or search the remaining folders before the appointment. I placed the sealed box, the payment confirmation, and the settlement papers in the trunk. Lily asked to come, and after checking with Denise, I agreed. This document had been left for her. I would not turn it into another secret adults controlled. Denise's office looked almost unchanged. The same framed degrees hung behind her desk, and the same narrow windows faced a parking garage. What had changed was the price of asking old questions. She explained that reviewing the case would require a new retainer, and a forensic accountant would charge separately. I transferred $12,500 from the emergency fund I had spent years rebuilding after the divorce. It was not effortless revenge money. It was the cushion that would no longer protect us from a broken furnace or a month without work. Lily noticed my hesitation when I signed. Is this because of me? No. It is because adults may have lied in documents they were legally required to complete. Denise made a photocopy of the payment confirmation and placed the original in a protective sleeve. She returned the copy to Lily. This belongs to your history, she told her. The original needs to stay where no one can claim it was altered. Then she turned to me. Nina gave you these materials directly? Yes, before she became too sick to manage Lily's care. You may use documents she lawfully possessed and voluntarily gave you. That does not give us permission to enter Valerie's accounts, pull her company email, or demand bank records without a lawsuit or consent. I told her I understood. A receipt proves a payment, Denise said. A pattern proves a story. We started with the documents from my divorce. Scott's company profit and loss statements contained a broad expense category labeled event logistics and client development. The total was large enough to hide many individual transactions, but the vendor names were not attached. I had asked about the category during the divorce. Scott had said it covered client dinners, conferences, and event support. His attorney had produced several invoices from Pike & Co., each using vague phrases such as administrative consulting, venue coordination, and client development services. None mentioned Nina, Lily, or an apartment. More important, Scott had signed a statement declaring that Blake Market Solutions had no transactions with businesses owned or controlled by my relatives. He had listed Pike & Co. as an independent vendor. My sister owned it then, I said. If Scott knew that and signed this anyway, the statement may be false, Denise replied. She found the warranty clause in our settlement. Scott had promised that he had disclosed all assets, liabilities, and transactions with related parties. If that promise was intentionally false, his duty to reimburse losses and certain legal expenses survived the divorce judgment. For the first time since opening Nina's envelope, possibility replaced shock with structure. "Can we reopen the divorce?" I asked. Not simply because we found this 6 years later. A normal motion based on fraud may be outside the usual time limit. We would need to examine a separate civil claim based on the settlement warranty, possible fraudulent inducement, an accounting, and perhaps a constructive trust. The statute of limitations will matter, including when you reasonably discovered the deception. She did not promise we would win. That made me trust her more. The forensic accountant reviewed only what we already possessed. He could compare dates, totals, and descriptions, but he could not see Pike & Co.'s bank account or internal ledger. What he found was a repeated pattern of payments from Blake Market Solutions that stopped in August of 2019, the same month I learned Lily existed. I told Lily only the 2 facts that belonged directly to the paper Nina had left her. The accountant had found matching monthly payments, and the final one was dated the month the affair was exposed. I did not show her legal theories, private correspondence, or anything that made her responsible for the case. I sent Valerie one neutral message. "I'm reviewing old divorce records. What services did Pike & Co. provide Blake Market Solutions between 2015 and 2019? She called within 3 minutes. "Why are you digging through this now?" I asked what services you provided. "I helped Scott make sure Nina could pay rent and keep Lily in school. Someone had to make sure that child wasn't abandoned." Her answer moved too quickly from business services to Nina. "You knew where the money was going." "Of course I knew. Scott asked for help, and I thought I was protecting you from details that would destroy you. You sent invoices. I ran a business, Aaron. I couldn't move money without records." She sounded offended that I had questioned her generosity. "If that was all you did, send Denise the service agreements and the accounting." Valerie went quiet. "Who is Denise?" "My attorney," I said, and her voice hardened. "You are about to tear this family apart again, because you cannot leave the past alone. The past left paperwork." I ended the call before she could redirect the conversation toward Lily. Back at Denise's office, we searched only the folders Nina had given me. Near the bottom of the housing file, Denise found a lease occupancy addendum. Pike & Co. Events was listed as the tenant. Nina Cross was listed as the authorized occupant. The apartment Scott had claimed he supported through private business income had been leased in my sister's company name. Denise placed the addendum beside the payment confirmation. "This does not prove the whole scheme," she said. "It proves your sister's company was not an unrelated vendor." The lease addendum changed the question. Until then, Valerie could still pretend she had only passed money from Scott to Nina. The document showed Pike & Co. Events had signed for the apartment itself and listed Nina as an authorized occupant under the description, "Temporary employee housing." Nina had never worked for my sister. Denise asked permission before examining the old phone Nina had given me. I unlocked it with the code Nina had written inside the records box. Most of the messages were ordinary pieces of a life that had ended too early. School reminders, pharmacy notifications, and photographs of Lily asleep with crayons still in her hand filled the screen. We searched only the names and dates connected to the records. A thread between Nina and Valerie began in 2017. Valerie rarely used complete sentences. She sent amounts, pickup times, and warnings about when Scott could safely visit. One message stopped me. "Scott is with me at a client event tonight. If Aaron calls, I'll handle it. Keep the porch light off until 10. The date was a night I remembered clearly. Scott had called from what he claimed was a hotel lobby, while Valerie texted me that a vendor crisis had delayed both of them. He had sounded irritated when I asked whether he would be home before Noah woke. At the time, I had apologized for checking. I read the message again. until the words stopped looking like language. She wasn't simply moving money, I said. No, Denise replied. This shows knowledge and participation. It still does not tell us everything the company recorded or what portion she kept. The distinction had to matter to me. Another folder contained printed emails Nina had saved. In one, Valerie reminded Scott to send that month's payment before the Friday when I was scheduled to review our joint cash flow for a mortgage refinance. Move it before Aaron looks at the balances. I can code the invoice, the usual way. I remembered that Friday, too. Scott had postponed the refinance meeting, claiming Blake Market Solutions had not closed its monthly books. Valerie later told me small businesses were always messy and advised me not to make Scott feel as though I distrusted him. She had not merely lied when I asked questions. She had learned when I planned to ask them. The forensic accountant arranged the documents by date. Payments from Blake Market Solutions appeared inside broad business expense categories, mixed with legitimate conference fees, catering costs, and client events. Scott had not transferred money directly from our joint checking account to Nina. He had moved money into his consulting company, then paid Pike & Co. as a vendor. That did not make the money separate from the marriage. It only made the route harder to see. The accountant could estimate the pattern from the records we had, but he refused to give me a final number. We can see repeated transfers and matching housing dates, he explained. We cannot say what Valerie retained without the company ledger, bank statements, or verified allocation records. I appreciated his refusal to turn suspicion into fact. I had spent too many years surrounded by people who changed the truth whenever it became inconvenient. Denise placed our divorce settlement beside the payment records. The warranty Scott had signed stated that he had fully disclosed assets, liabilities, and related party transactions. Pike & Co. had been presented as an independent vendor, even though my sister owned it. That clause is why this may still be actionable, Denise said. It is not a guarantee. Scott will argue you had enough information to investigate earlier. We will argue he gave sworn statements designed to prevent exactly that investigation. What about Valerie? Her exposure depends on what the evidence shows she received, represented, and concealed. We are not alleging crimes because we are angry. We are preserving the possibility of a civil claim. There would be no dramatic arrest, no judge reading our papers and instantly declaring me right. There would be legal fees, challenges over time limits, and arguments about what I should have known 6 years earlier. Truth did not erase procedure. As Denise explained which records might still exist, I remembered Matthew's joke at the open house about Pike & Co. Is outside accounting system keeping 10 years of invoices, attachments, and approvals for lenders and insurers. She leaned back. If that is accurate, records from 2017 through 2019 may still exist. We cannot access them now. We can demand that they be preserved once litigation is reasonably anticipated. Pike & Co. was preparing to purchase a wedding venue for roughly $1.1 million. Denise found public filings, confirming that Valerie and Matthew were both managers of the company. She did not have their private operating agreement, but the pending purchase meant there would be lenders, attorneys, and due diligence. We do not threaten the transaction, she said. We send preservation demands to the relevant people and let their own obligations determine what happens next. She drafted letters to Valerie, Scott, Matthew, the company's business attorney, and its outside accountant. The letters would state that litigation was reasonably anticipated and instruct them not to destroy emails, invoices, ledgers, or housing records connected to Blake Market Solutions, Nina, or the apartment. They are not court orders, Denise reminded me. They do not freeze accounts or prove wrongdoing. They create notice. If someone deletes relevant material after receiving them, that decision may have consequences. The forensic accountant completed his preliminary timeline late on Christmas Eve. By the time Denise finished identifying the records, custodians, and outside vendors that had to receive notice, the offices involved had closed for the holiday. She queued the emails for 8 o'clock on December 26th, the first morning after Christmas, and scheduled courier copies for the next business day. Denise also prepared a draft complaint and asked the forensic accountant to write an affidavit, describing only the pattern supported by the documents we already possessed. Nothing would be filed before Christmas. On the drive home, I considered calling my mother and canceling the party. The investigation gave me one reason to avoid Valerie. Lily gave me another. I did not need a court file to know my sister had spent years treating her like a stain. I called Denise from the driveway. "Would you tell me not to take the children tomorrow?" "That is not a legal question," she said. "If you believe the event is emotionally unsafe, you do not need litigation strategy to justify leaving them home." My mother promised Lily would be included. "Then decide whether the promise deserves one final chance. Do not attend, because you think it will help the case. It would not be a trap. I would not bring Lily into a room so Valerie could expose herself." The preservation demands were going out, whether the party happened peacefully or not. I found Lily in her room sliding the photocopied payment confirmation into the back pocket of her art folder. "You do not need to take that," I said. "I know," she replied. "Then why are you?" She touched Nina's note beside it. "When Aunt Valerie talks about me, I start wondering if maybe she's right. Mom left this so I wouldn't. You are not responsible for showing anyone evidence." "I'm not planning to." I believed her. The paper was not a weapon in her mind. It was proof that the adults had made arrangements, accepted money, and told lies before she had been old enough to read. "You may keep it with you," I said. "But if anything happens tomorrow, you look at me. I handle the adults." Lily nodded. Carol called that evening to confirm we were coming. She repeated that all 4 grandchildren would be photographed. She named Noah, Lily, Mason, and Chloe, without hesitation this time. After the call, Raymond sent Noah a photograph of the family watch and wrote that he planned to give it to him at the party. Noah showed me the message. "If Grandpa leaves Lily out again, I'm not taking it. You do not have to decide tonight. I already did." We agreed on a signal before going to bed. If either child touched 2 fingers to their wrist, we would leave without debate. I would drive myself, drink no alcohol, and keep our coats near the entrance. The next morning, Lily signed the corner of Carol's portrait and placed it inside her folder. Noah carried both children's coats downstairs, while I checked that my keys were in my purse. No one mentioned the documents scheduled to arrive the following morning. I did not intend to discuss them at the party. At the front door, Lily stopped with the portrait against her chest. "What if they still don't want me in the picture?" I looked at the child who had spent years trying to become impossible to reject. "Then we learn the truth about them," I said. "Not about you." Valerie had chosen a restored event hall outside Columbus for my mother's 70th birthday. Pike & Co. covered the beams with warm lights and built a Christmas display large enough for a department store window. The room was beautiful because Valerie understood appearances. Carol stood beside the entrance in a silver dress. She greeted Noah with uncomplicated affection, hugging him and calling him her handsome grandson. When Lily approached with the covered portrait, Carol offered a polite smile. "And you brought something. How thoughtful." She unwrapped the painting and immediately recognized the blue shutters, apple tree, and cracked stone step. "Oh," she whispered. "That's our old house." Lily explained how she had used Noah's photographs and Carol's memories. My mother's eyes filled, but her thanks still sounded like something offered to a talented guest. Valerie interrupted before the moment could become intimate. "Mom, we need you near the cake. The portrait can go with the other items." "It's a gift, not an item," I said, retrieving it when she tried to carry it away. "We'll keep it until Carol has somewhere safe to place it." Valerie rolled her eyes. It was the first warning. Raymond showed Noah the family watch and said it would one day pass to his son. "Does Lily get anything from the family?" Noah asked. "This is passed through the men," Raymond replied. "That isn't what I asked." When Raymond blamed me for making things complicated, Noah pushed the box back. "If it only belongs to me because you excluded her, I don't want it. He returned to Lily before my father could answer. Minutes later, Valerie introduced Lily to a church friend as Aaron's special project. This is my daughter, I corrected. You keep choosing words that require correction. Carol passed us on her way to the cake table and whispered, Please, try to enjoy tonight. You told Valerie Lily was included, didn't you? I asked. Carol avoided my eyes. I told her I wanted a peaceful evening. She had promised protection and delivered a request for silence. I had already spent years trying to enjoy rooms where my daughter was required to disappear politely. We stayed because Carol had made a promise, and Lily had not given our signal to leave. After dinner, Valerie directed a series of planned family photographs before the photographer stepped in front of the Christmas tree. All the grandchildren, right here, he called. Mason and Chloe ran forward. Noah followed. Lily looked at me, and I nodded. She carried Carol's portrait toward the tree, hoping my mother would finally see her, as part of the history she had worked so hard to preserve. Valerie moved directly into her path. Not the affair, child, she said, loud enough to reach the cake table. We're not framing that mistake. A cousin gave a nervous laugh that died alone. A glass struck a table too hard. The photographer lowered his camera and looked toward Carol. My mother said nothing. Lily lowered the portrait against her knees. She did not cry. Her face became carefully blank as she opened the art folder and removed the photocopied payment confirmation. Valerie's color changed. Aunt Valerie, Lily asked, should I show them why Dad paid you every month to hide Nina and me from Mom? The room became still. Valerie recovered quickly enough to laugh. That is a business receipt. You have no idea what you're holding. It has your company's name on it. My company provided consulting services to Scott. Lily looked at the date. Then why did the payments stop the month Mom learned I existed? I reached her before Valerie could answer and took the paper gently from her hands. That is enough, I said. You never had to prove anything. Lily stepped behind my shoulder, still holding the portrait. Valerie pointed at the page. You gave a child financial records so she could ambush me? Nina left it for her. I planned only to leave when you insulted my daughter, and you made sure we did not wait long. Valerie turned to the family, as though searching for a more sympathetic jury. The payments were legitimate consulting fees. I kept myself between her and Lily. Her name is Lily. She has never cheated, lied to a wife, or taken money to hide a child. She is not carrying your shame anymore. Then I held up the payment confirmation. If these were ordinary consulting fees, explain why Pike & Co. was named as the tenant on Nina's lease. Matthew, standing beside the cake table, spoke for the first time. Our company signed a lease for Nina? Valerie glanced at him. It was temporary housing connected to Scott's account. What consulting work required housing? Matthew asked. It supported the arrangement. Matthew asked what arrangement she meant. Valerie looked toward Carol, then back at him. Scott needed a private place to see Lily without creating more chaos at home. Whose home were you protecting? Aaron didn't need every detail while Scott was figuring things out. The admission arrived in pieces, each explanation contradicting the one before it. By the time Valerie stopped speaking, everyone understood that she had not merely processed invoices. She had helped design the secrecy. My sister had spent years pretending Lily represented an offense against our family, while defending the apartment she had helped conceal from me. Carol stepped forward. Please, Aaron, not today. I looked at my mother. Valerie called a 12-year-old. A mistake in front of everyone you invited. This is my 70th birthday, and that matters more to you than what she just did. Raymond moved beside her. You adopted her, he said. We didn't. There was no confusion left to correct. My parents understood exactly what they were doing. You are right, I said. You did not choose Lily. You chose Valerie's cruelty, your reputation, and a version of family that requires one child to accept humiliation. That is why neither of you will have access to my children after tonight. Carol looked toward Noah. You don't mean him. I mean both of them. Raymond turned to Noah. Stay for the photograph. Your mother is upset. Noah walked over to Lily and took one side of the portrait so she would not have to carry it alone. I'm leaving with my family. I looked at the photographer. There will be no photograph of my children tonight. I did not ask him to remove Valerie or stage a more satisfying picture. Lily's place in our family would not be decided by who stood beneath Carol's Christmas tree. We collected our coats while Valerie blamed my divorce. Carol cried that I was ruining her birthday, and Raymond ordered Noah back. None of us turned around. In the car, Lily held the portrait across her lap. Did I ruin Grandma's birthday? No. Valerie ruined it when she turned your existence into entertainment, and Carol protected the party instead of you. I wasn't supposed to show the paper. You asked one question after she humiliated you. I am not angry with you. Noah reached across the seat and covered her hand. By the time we reached home, 23 messages demanded, I apologized to Carol, or condemned me for making a private matter public. I saved them and answered none. At 11:37, Valerie emailed me. She blamed Lily for repeating something she could not understand, demanded that I cancel whatever legal action I had planned, and warned that Matthew had no right to review old company files. I forwarded the email to Denise. At 11:59, her reply appeared. Emails are queued for 8. The courier copies go Monday. At 8 the next morning, Denise's emails reached Valerie, Scott, Matthew, Pike & Company's business attorney, and the outside accounting firm that maintained the company's records. The letters did not freeze accounts or accuse anyone of a crime. Denise stated clearly that litigation was reasonably anticipated and that documents connected to Blake Market Solutions, Nina, the apartment and the payments must not be altered or destroyed. Courier copies would be delivered on Monday, when offices reopened. I learned what followed through Denise and the messages Matthew later forwarded to our attorneys. I was not inside Pike & Co.'s system, and I did not need to pretend I was. The people who had built their lives around secrecy began documenting one another without my help. Matthew received the letter as both chief financial officer and co-manager. Their operating agreement gave either manager the power to place a 72-hour compliance hold when there was a credible allegation of financial misconduct. At 8:23, he instructed the outside accounting vendor to suspend deletion permissions and preserve the company's immutable backup. He could not remove Valerie's ownership or fire her by himself, but he could prevent records from disappearing while the company's attorney reviewed the allegations. The wedding venue purchase had been scheduled to close on Monday. Both Valerie's and Matthew's signatures were required. Matthew notified the attorneys that he would not sign until he understood why Pike & Co. had leased an apartment for Nina, while accepting monthly payments from Scott's company. That single refusal did not destroy the business. It stopped the largest deal Valerie had ever attempted. My phone rang shortly after 9. Valerie did not begin with denial. She began with Lily. Your daughter has ruined everything, she cried. Matthew thinks I've been stealing from the company because of a piece of paper a child waved around at a birthday party. Lily did not create the apartment, the invoices, or the payments. You filled her head with this. I told her she never had to prove anything. You were the one who called her a mistake in front of a room full of people. You could have handled it privately. You had 7 years to tell me privately. Her breathing changed. Anger replaced panic. If Matthew pulls out of this deal, we lose the deposit. We lose the venue. People lose jobs. Speak to Denise. You are my sister. You remembered that after the preservation letter arrived. Valerie's voice broke again. Are you really going to destroy my life over something Scott did years ago? I didn't destroy your life. I stopped protecting the life you built by destroying ours. I ended the call and sent the recording of the voicemail she left afterward to Denise. I had not recorded our conversation, but Valerie repeated most of her accusations in a message when I refused to answer again. An hour later, Scott called for the first time in 11 months. I put the phone on speaker because Noah was in the kitchen and had already seen his father's name on the screen. Lily sat at the table with her untouched breakfast, but when Scott asked to speak to her, she shook her head. "This needs to stay between the adults," Scott said. "It should have stayed with the adults from the beginning." Instead, Lily spent years being blamed for it. Dragging Valerie's company into court will not change how Lily was born. No, it will change who is forced to carry the consequences. Scott lowered his voice. "Think about what this does to her. Every filing will repeat the affair. Every document will attach her name to it. You attached her name to it when you built a payment system around hiding her." He said I was acting out of revenge. Noah stood before I could respond. "Dad, stop," he said. "You keep talking like Lily is the embarrassing part." Scott tried to soften his tone. "Noah, you don't understand the legal situation. I understand you're blaming Mom because she found out what you did." Scott asked to speak with him privately. Noah refused. "I don't want another call until you can talk about Lily without treating her like the problem." He ended the call himself. Lily watched him set the phone down. "You didn't have to do that." "Yes, I did. You might miss him later." "I already miss who I thought he was." Carol called before noon. She demanded that I bring both children back to her house and apologize for humiliating her in front of family and friends. "Valerie said something cruel," she admitted. "But you turned my birthday into a legal attack." The letters were scheduled before the party. That truth silenced her for only a moment. "Then you came knowing what you planned to do." "I came because you promised Lily would be treated as your granddaughter. I planned to leave if that promise was broken." Valerie chose everything that followed. Carol began crying. She said relatives were calling, church friends were asking questions, and Raymond had barely spoken since we left. None of her pain concerned Lily. That afternoon, I removed Carol and Raymond from the children's school pickup lists. I updated the emergency contacts at their doctor's offices and informed the school that no family member besides those I named could receive schedules, medical information, or permission to leave campus with either child. Raymond called as soon as Carol told him, "You are treating us like dangerous people. A person does not need to hit a child to become unsafe for her. I have never harmed Lily. You told her she was not family while standing beside the woman who called her a mistake. That is not the same as violence. No, it is the kind of harm people excuse because it leaves no bruise." He warned me that I was cutting Noah off from his heritage. I told him Noah had already chosen what kind of heritage he wanted. On Monday morning, Pike & Co.'s business attorney formally notified the lender and the venue seller of a material financial discrepancy. The loan agreement required disclosure when company records might contain inaccurate expenses or related party transactions. The lender postponed closing. The seller activated a contractual deadline giving Pike & Co. limited time to resolve the issue before the deal could be canceled. Matthew moved into a hotel that weekend. According to the email his attorney sent Denise, he had not left because anyone had been convicted. He had left because, after receiving the preservation demand, Valerie asked him to delete a folder labeled Old Temporary Housing. He refused and saved her request. The outside accounting vendor began reviewing the archived records from 2017 through 2019. Their system had retained invoices, attachments, and approval histories. Earlier years were less complete and would need to be reconstructed through Nina's copies, bank records, and formal discovery. The preliminary review did not prove every allegation. It did establish that Pike & Co. had received recurring payments from Blake Market Solutions and that Valerie had approved invoices connected to the apartment. The internal allocations showed that about $1,050 from each monthly transfer had been booked as an administrative fee for Pike & Co. and approved by Valerie. Later owner distribution records suggested a corresponding portion had flowed to her personally, although the accountants warned that the final amount still required bank record verification. Pike & Co.'s attorney proposed an interim management agreement. To prevent the lender from declaring a default, Valerie surrendered temporary authority to approve payments or alter financial records. She kept her ownership, but she no longer controlled the money. One major client postponed an upcoming event because of the management change. Most clients did not flee overnight. The company continued operating, but every large payment now required review. In January, Denise filed a civil complaint against Scott and Valerie based on the disclosure warranty, alleged fraudulent inducement, and a request for a full accounting. They were served through the ordinary civil process, and discovery would be required to obtain complete bank records, tax filings, and sworn testimony. Denise made no promise about the outcome. Meanwhile, Carol sent a long message to our relatives, claiming I had used Lily to punish the family. A few people agreed with her. Others began admitting they had heard Valerie's comments for years and remained silent because confronting her would have been uncomfortable. Lily heard enough to ask me one night, "Do they hate me more now?" I sat beside her on the couch. "The consequences are getting bigger," I said. "That does not mean your wrongdoing is getting bigger, because you did nothing wrong. They are angry because they can no longer decide where the shame belongs." Near the end of January, Denise called after receiving the first approval records from Pike & Co.'s archive. Her voice was calm, but I heard the difference immediately. "Now we can prove she did not merely know," Denise said. She approved the system that paid her. By June, 6 months had passed since Denise's preservation demands reached everyone involved. The letters had not convicted anyone. They had preserved the records that allowed the audit and civil discovery to begin. The wedding venue purchase failed when the financing contingency expired. Pike & Co. continued operating, but money intended for expansion went instead to accountants, attorneys, and consultants, and several years of books had to be restated. Under the interim management agreement, Valerie could not approve payments, alter vendor files, or delete records. After the audit and an internal mediation, she sold part of her voting interest to Matthew and an existing investor and stepped away from daily management to prevent a lender default. Pike & Co. established a repayment schedule for unsupported fees, and Valerie personally guaranteed the portion tied to her approvals and owner distributions. Matthew remained separated from her. He had not created Scott's affair, but he had signed documents without asking enough questions and benefited from the company's growth. His marriage, savings, and reputation paid part of that price. My civil case moved more slowly. The 2020 divorce judgment remained in place, while our separate claims relied on Scott's disclosure warranty, the misrepresentation of Pike & Co. as an unrelated vendor, and the money he had concealed through Blake Market Solutions. By June, Scott agreed to mediation. He did not admit every allegation. People like Scott rarely gave truth away when a settlement could purchase narrower language. But he agreed to provide a full accounting, reimburse part of the concealed funds in installments, and pay a portion of my legal and forensic accounting fees. The agreement was not justice in its purest form. It was a practical result supported by documents he had once believed no one would connect. My claims involving Valerie were only partly resolved. Her obligations to Pike & Co. were separate from what she might owe me, and several issues remained under negotiation. I did not need a criminal ending to know she had lost control of the life built around her silence. Scott sent Lily a letter after mediation. The envelope remained sealed on my desk for 3 days before I asked what she wanted me to do with it. "Did you read it?" she asked. "No, I didn't." "Do you want to?" "It was written to you." She thought for a moment, then placed it inside the cedar box with Nina's things. "Maybe later," she said. I did not tell her forgiveness would help her heal. I did not explain that Scott was still her biological father, as if biology created an obligation to hear him. The choice belonged to her. Carol also wrote. Her letter was 6 pages long, but only one paragraph mattered. She did not say she was sorry if Lily had felt excluded. She wrote that she had watched Valerie use a child's birth as a weapon and had called her own silence neutrality, because admitting the truth would have required her to act. I wrote back that I appreciated the honesty. I also told her honesty did not restore access to my children. Carol accepted the answer without arguing, at least directly. She began counseling and sent birthday cards addressed correctly. I kept them in a drawer until the children decided whether they wanted them. Raymond made no similar effort. He told Noah by email that our family had abandoned tradition for temporary feelings. Noah responded once. He wrote that a tradition requiring him to accept something Lily was forbidden to share was not a tradition he wanted. Then he returned the family watch, through insured mail. Lily found him printing the shipping label and stood in the doorway. "You really sent it back?" "Yes, I did. You might never get it again." "That's the point." She sat on the edge of his bed. "Did I make you lose Grandma and Grandpa?" Noah closed the box before answering. "You didn't make them do anything. They chose the conditions. Mom just stopped making us live under them." Lily looked unconvinced, but she did not apologize. That was progress. A week later, I found her standing in front of the portrait she had painted for Carol. It was still wrapped in the cloth we had used at Christmas. "Do you want to send it to her?" I asked. Lily shook her head. "I painted it because I wanted her to know I listened." "You did listen," I said. Lily looked at the covered portrait. She didn't. We hung the portrait in Lily's room above the cedar box. She did not cut Carol out of the memory, or destroy the painting to prove she was angry. The work belonged to her now. So did the care she had put into it. That evening, Lily asked whether loving Nina had made it harder for me to love her. I sat beside her on the floor. "Nina hurt me," I said. "She made choices that harmed me and Noah. She also loved you. Both things are true. Did you forgive her?" "Not completely," I said. Lily waited for the rest. "I did not have to forgive everything she did in order to understand that you were never responsible for it." For years, Lily had believed love required a clean story. One good mother, one bad mother, one innocent family, and one guilty child. Real love was less orderly. It allowed grief and anger to exist without assigning them to the person least able to carry them. By summer, our home sounded normal again. No legal update arrived every day. Some weeks passed without Denise calling. Pike & Co. continued operating under new controls. Scott made the first installment required by the settlement. Valerie's attorney negotiated without using the word family as a defense. None of those things mattered, as much as what happened on an ordinary Thursday afternoon. Lily came through the front door, dropped her backpack in the middle of the hallway, and kicked off her shoes without placing them on the mat. She walked into the kitchen, opened the refrigerator, and stared inside. "Mom, did Noah eat my cake?" From the living room, Noah called. "You left it for 3 days. It had my name on it. It had a sticky note that fell off." "That sounds like something a guilty person would say." She took the last yogurt, then returned with a permission form from school. "I need you to sign this before tomorrow." I signed the page and handed it back. "Put your shoes away first." Lily sighed with the full irritation of a 12-year-old who had never considered that one misplaced pair of shoes could threaten her home. "I was going to. You walked past them twice. I'm doing it now." She picked up the shoes, still complaining about Noah and the missing cake, then called me Mom again without watching my face to see whether she had earned the right. I looked at the backpack blocking the hallway, the open refrigerator, and the unsigned space where fear used to live. A child can be born from an adult's mistake without ever being a mistake herself. Blood can create a connection, but it cannot create safety, loyalty, or love. Those things are built by the people who stay when staying offers them nothing except the chance to protect someone. The day Lily finally believed she belonged wasn't the day they let her into a photograph. It was the day she stopped asking permission to come home.